We were testing yesterday, and then we got one.
Click on the live one. We on the live one today.
Okay.
Yeah, the other one should be gone. Yeah, don't
Okay.
click
So
on
I
that
know
one.
when I
That may
clicked on it,
actually
it
still
said
be
five. Well,
active,
make
but
sure you click one.
I am. I'm gonna actually
Okay. The
delete this
vibe
one.
check with Dr. Q and friends.
Yep, I'm gonna delete the vibe check from
Okay.
yesterday so we won't have no
Okay. Here we go.
problems.
Okay, that's what it was. I was clicking on the. I clicked on the other one when I first joined.
Okay, Maya, you can come back in.
Recording in progress.
All right,
Okay.
change your background, Brandy. You good? There you go. Boom. All right, let's see. It is 11:46. I don't want to go live until like 11:55, but I'm gonna go ahead and set it up. It's not a new link. It's the same one. How's the sound, Brandy?
It sounds good. It sounds good on my end.
Huh?
It sounds good on my end.
Are you on mute?
Hold on. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Q?
I can't hear you.
Oh, hold on. Can you hear me now?
I'll make you the co-host.
Okay. Q, can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Hold on. I'm not on mute.
What happened? We was just I could just hear you.
I know.
To Welcome to Vibe Check with Dr. Q and friends, where we will dive into conversations we need to have with our young people, but oftentimes we tend to avoid these conversations. The holidays are coming up, and today we're talking about how to help our young people navigate respect, boundaries, and identity, whether that's during a family gathering, holiday party, or even a good old kickback. Today I'm joined by Miss Brandy Roberts. I'm so excited to have Miss Roberts because she has worked in sexual health and STD prevention for more than 15 years. She has a wealth of knowledge about how to navigate these conversations. She's here to help us feel confident as parents when it comes to guiding our young people around these conversations.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Q. On this good day before Thanksgiving, I am so excited to be here. As you mentioned, I've been doing this work for about 15 years, and I've seen just how challenging it has been for parents to have these conversations. So, as we always say, this is long overdue. We're not just about giving information, we want to build trust. We want to help these young folks feel empowered so that they can make the choices and choices that work for them. So, yeah, definitely excited to be here.
All right, guys, so I want you to think of this as a conversation. We'll talk through a couple of real life scenarios and just kind of give you guys some questions and some tools that you can use right away. So think about tomorrow when you're going to have those family members coming in, aunties that has no censor, feels like they can say whatever is on their heart and on their mind, or that uncle that sometimes poses some things that are kind of risque toward our young people. By the end of this, we hope that you'll feel equipped to handle tough holiday moments and create a stronger connection with your young people. Let's start by talking about why it matters so much, especially now during the holiday season. So, when we think about this, holidays are a very unique time. We have family gatherings, parties, and traditions that create opportunities for connections, but they also come with challenges. There's, like I mentioned before, the aunt who pushes for hugs, the uncle who asks out of line personal questions, or the social situations that leave your young person feeling awkward. and with their boundaries being tested. These moments are teachable moments if we're ready to have the conversation. So I like to say, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. When it comes to navigating hard conversations with our young people, we first have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest and we have to be open and willing to have these conversations in a non-judgmental manner. Brandy, what do you think?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. So for us, and even just kind of just having these conversations, we want to be able to guide youth before it happens because we all know things that come up and you're not ready to have these conversations, whether you're trying to check a family member for talking crazy or making those comments or, learning how to set those boundaries. And I think that's something that we need to equip our youth with so that they know how to handle themselves, when those situations come up, how to have those conversations, how to be empowered, how to have self-advocacy for themselves so that they know how to help themselves when these particular situations come up and they can be prepared. That's basically what it's all about, being prepared for when these conversations come up, these situations come up, and having the tools to be able to help them and their parents as well.
All right. So we know that preparation reduces anxiety for young adults. It's really about
Mm-hmm.
showing them that we have their back, right? In the heat of the moment, we want our young people to be confident in who they are and to know that if they are in a situation, even if that's with family members, that we have their back. So we're going to transition into some scenarios. But before we dive into those scenarios, let's make sure we're all on the same page. Brandy, start with consent. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So consent is very important. So of course we all have different ways that we like to define consent. But for today, when we talk about consent, we're going to talk about consent meaning respecting someone's boundaries and choices, whether we're talking about physical touch, language, how they want to be addressed, and it applies to all interactions. So we're talking about those family dynamics, those social situations. So if you're at those kickbacks, as Dr. Q mentioned, and also romantic relationships as well. So consent covers all of that. So we want to make it clear or kind of start with a definition because we want individuals to understand that consent applies to all of those interactions. It doesn't just apply to, oh, you're saying yes, you're saying no, but it also applies to, like I say, your family. It applies to those situations where you're out and you're dealing with those situations where you have to make choices.
Yeah. So, Brandy, I'm glad you pointed that out around consent, not just being around romantic relationships or you get
Mm-hmm.
into a situation. A lot of times when we think about consent, we think about you've gotten into a situation where it may go further sexually.
Right.
And did I say yes or did I say no? Did I consent to this? But consent is so much bigger than that. We should understand and respect boundaries and know that consent transcends all of that. It's important. It's so important that we create that we center consent as a value for our families, right? So that they understand that regardless of the situation, whether that be with families or you're at a kickback with friends, consent transcends all of those situations. So this also includes, respecting people's identity. Let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about that a little bit. What does that mean? When I say respecting people's identity, why does that matter, Brandy?
Yeah, most definitely. So, this is one of the things that comes up and that we hear all the time is when we're talking about pronouns. Why should we use them? Why is it important? But that comes along with consent. That is about respecting how someone wants to identify themselves. So, we're actually going to go through one of the scenarios because, again, that's one of the things that come up. Individuals don't know how to handle that, when a person comes in and say, I want to be called they, or I want to be called us. So using their pronouns correctly is just one of the ways that you can show respect to their autonomy and also their identity. And as we know, these small actions make a big impact. So you may think that it's something that's small to you, or you may think, oh, well, what you mean? She looks like a she. But if that's not how that person wants to be identified, I mean, you should respect that. And that comes with, again, just going back to the consent and honoring that person's values and honoring, the things that they want to do.
Okay, so before we dive into our scenarios, let's touch on one more thing, Brandy. So we
Mm-hmm,
would be remiss not to talk about sexual health. So this goes back to why we're even here. Why are we having these conversations? And then too, what is a vibe check? So guys, a vibe check is part of our Vibe Safe initiative. Brandy and I are on a mission to destigmatize HIV and STIs amongst adolescents and young adults. Some of you guys may know that we currently have an STI outbreak, specifically gonorrhea, in the state that is predominantly Black and brown 13 to
mm-hmm,
24-year-olds that are adversely impacted by this outbreak. And a lot of this comes from our unwillingness to have
mm-hmm.
the hard conversations. So, a vibe check is simply our opportunity to create educational opportunities and to check for knowledge to make sure that everybody understands exactly what's going on and that they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to navigate these conversations. So we definitely have to talk about, sexual health. When we talk about consent, it's not just around romantic relationships. It also has to do with when we're in those social situations that could potentially put us in harm's way. Or even in situations where we think we're just going to have a good time, but our boundaries are pushed. For example, this is not a Diddy party. Brandy knows that I'm going to bring that up because I have some great deal of concern around this Diddy situation and how consensual
Mm-hmm.
were these behaviors, and were people aware of what they were or were not consenting to. So this goes to those kickbacks as our young people are coming home from college and their friends are coming home. They're going to be put in scenarios with people that they know but they don't really know, because from high school to college, baby, people change. They change substantially, and this may be somebody that you were cool with in high school, but now they've gone to college and they've had new lived experiences. They have new values. They have just new things that they're doing because that's just them. And you go and you find out, oh, I ain't about that life. Do they know how to get out of the situation? But also, this goes back to our families. We've got to have hard conversations that sometimes these holiday gatherings can pose a threat to the well-being of our young people because of inappropriate behaviors. So yeah, what do you think, Brent?
Yeah. And then also, even going back to sexual health, as you mentioned, and also the current STI outbreak that we're currently in Arkansas, and even across the United States. And this is also a great time for you to remind your young adults about safe sex practices like using condoms, going to get tested. Does your young person know where to go get tested? Where can they go to get tested? Like you say, when they go to them kickbacks and maybe, get in that situation where they may engage in some risky behavior, do they know where to go get tested? Do they know where to get condoms? Do you have condoms that you can provide for those young adults? So as we know, it's not about judgment. It's about helping them make informed choices and decisions, not us being judgmental, not us saying, oh, trying to act like, we didn't do those things when we were growing up, but definitely giving them the tools that they need. So, I mean, you won't have to worry about them going back to college or wherever they may go, with STIs, worrying about them getting pregnant. We also got to think about the pregnancy aspect as well, and why it's important, for them to know, how to access these services around town or even know about that, because that's the main thing. Individuals or young adults just don't know about this information. And oftentimes they don't learn about this until they go to till they go to college, or like Q was saying, with us having an outbreak, that's from individuals not knowing. So definitely you want to put your young adult with those tools so that they can prevent, because STIs are preventable. At the end of the day, they're preventable, whether you're using condoms or any things to kind of protect yourself. Just understanding that those options are preventable. We just got to equip them with the knowledge so that they would know.
So that's an interesting that you say that. Yes, condoms is prevention. The other thing,
Mm-hmm.
before we get to the utilization of condoms, education is key.
Right.
Education, knowing that it is okay to ask the question about somebody to somebody that you're about to engage in activity. You should be aware of their status. And if they don't know their status, then y'all should probably have a conversation before y'all engage in activity. But does your young person feel comfortable asking, the person that they want to engage in activity with, hey, when was the last time you got tested? And then the other thing that I want to plug, Brandy mentioned, do you have condoms? If you don't worry. Okay. My office is located at 811 North Grant Street, Unit 6. Okay. 811 North Grant Street, Unit 6. What I'm going to do, because it is the holiday season, I am going to put a jar of condoms outside my door. You ain't even got to knock on the door. If your young person needs condoms, please come retrieve them. You don't even got to go to the store and buy them. Okay. Condoms, I want to make sure that they are easily accessible to anyone that may need them, specifically our young adults that may be in a situation. So this is what I tell them: it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. All right. So let's jump into our scenarios, Brandy. Scenario one: your young adult tells you they now use different pronouns and are worried about how the family will react at holiday gatherings. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. So again, just kind of going back to what I mentioned, this is something that comes up a lot, especially, now that we have individuals, especially young adults that are comfortable in themselves. And it's oftentimes the family members that tend to have challenges, with how to address these situations. So as a parent, when you have a child that comes to you and say, hey, this is now my new pronoun. This is what I want to be to go as. First of all, thank them for trusting you, because that's important, that they even have the courage to even come to you and let you know, like, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is what I want to go by. And then also you can be helpful by asking, like, well, how can I support you? If we're at a Thanksgiving dinner, or and of course, you're coming out, letting family members know, do you want me to step in to, if somebody uses your wrong pronoun, how would you, or do you prefer to address it yourself? Because some young adults, as we know, are very vocal. A lot of our young adults are very vocal, so they may want to address it themselves. But just being a supportive parent to let them know that you got their back. I'm not going to sit up here and let, family members, whether it's my sister, uncles, aunties, or whatever, talk to you all crazy or whatever, because this is what you decide to do. So the main thing is about just supporting that young adult, let them know whether you agree with it or not. That's the main thing. Whether you agree with it or not, knowing that you have their back and knowing that you're going to support what it is that they want to do.
Excellent. So what I hear, Brady, is that this is an opportunity for us to set the tone for respect and support. It really is true that how you handle this
Mm-hmm.
initially can impact how they feel about their identity. So one
It's
of the
true.
tools that we have in our toolbox that sometimes we forget to use is silence. The initial conversation when your young person approaches you about this, it may startle you a little bit. Take a moment for yourself to really
Mm-hmm.
reflect upon and internalize what it is that you're hearing, so that what you say next is intentional, so that what you say next is actually helpful and not hurtful, because it's difficult to bounce back from that. So it is okay to take a moment to step back and to even let your young person, I hear you,
Right.
and I need a moment to adjust. And then I want to revisit this conversation with you so that they know that you've been thoughtful about it. What else do you think, Brandy?
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
useful tools, other
Yeah,
useful tools.
exactly. I know one of the things that that's always been helpful to me, and even working in corporate America and having staff, one of the things that's always been helpful is role playing. And again, going back to what I was mentioning about how to be prepared, how to have your young adult prepared, role play. Okay, so let's sit up here and have a conversation about what can go down, because again, we all know those family members that's gonna talk crazy are gonna have something to say. So let's role play that situation before we even get to Thanksgiving dinner. Okay, so you have a relative, and y'all know them. especially your older aunties. Well, I don't understand why they or them is a thing, or why that she, I see she, again. And as the parent, this is when you need to step in and advocate for your child, especially if they're not comfortable. And of course, we know in some cultures you don't want to be disrespectful. So this is when you, as an adult, need to step in and say, okay, actually, such and such uses this pronoun, and we're going to respect that. And that's it. We're done. We're not going to have conversations about it. And go ahead and eat your collard greens and macaroni, and we're gonna keep it moving instead of us sitting up here trying to indulge in that, because what we're not gonna do is make my child feel uncomfortable while we're trying to eat our turkey today. So again, just using role play as a way for even yourself to be comfortable with it, because even if that's something that you don't agree with, this will make you feel comfortable, comfortable, with having that conversation. And again, it's all about the child, all about making them feel comfortable, and all about, again, letting them know that you have their back.
Yes, you said a very important thing, Brandy. It may not be something that you agree with, but
Mm-hmm.
we go throughout life having respect for things that don't necessarily align with our beliefs. You don't have to agree with it in order to be respectful of someone else, because it's not about you. It's about them. And it's about how they identify and how they want to be seen. So that's very, very important. So would you like to dive into the next scenario, or are there more things that you want to share around this?
Yeah, we can go ahead and dive, because I feel like all of our scenarios are connected. And I think it's very important that, again, we have these conversations because, Q, as you know, we know this comes up all the time. And even, one of the things that, we like to say or even mention is that, okay, even just learning, from your experience, because even being a parent myself, I can think of situations where I wish my mom, would have supported me. And I don't know if my mom is on here, and of course she's a great parent, but again, that's just one of those things where you know better and you do better. Okay,
Yes.
and again, that's what it just goes back to, how do you support your children? Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters, especially with us having this mental health crisis. And it starts from that, with kids not having support of their parents. So that's just my little 2 cents I want to add before we go into our next scenario.
All right, now, Brandy, you getting me riled up because you're saying all
Right.
kind of things that I know that we need to talk about. Before we dive into the second scenario, I just want to pause here for a minute around this conversation. A couple of things that you said was, hey, it may not be the way that you grew up, right?
Right.
Um, do we value tradition more than we value our children? It's a question. Just because we've always done it that way and it's always
Mm-hmm.
been okay for the elders in our family to say whatever's on their mind and their heart, that don't make it right. Because I can tell you, as a young girl, it offended me when people told me I was getting big as a house. I don't, please don't compare me to a house. I'm not as big as a house now. You can say that a little bit more kinda, or a little more productive, or other things that we hear, specifically around, and I have a young adult that's coming home from college. One of the things that we typically hear around, specifically around for Black and brown girls, them hips spreading. You must be what? Don't your hips spread? I mean, what about the freshman 15? Why can't just be eating? Why
Right.
why my hips spreading? Because I'm now, and being grown, as we like to say, being grown. What are your thoughts, Brandy? What are some
Right. Yeah.
things that just culturally may be keeping us in a chokehold that we really need to check and reevaluate?
Yeah. I mean, just as you mentioned, so young adults have not having the space to even say anything, because as we know, that was always seen as disrespectful.
As
It's even with your
disrespectful.
grandma, telling you that you're thicker than a snicker. And I know that's one of our scenarios, but that's just one of the things where, they will say things, and I guess you're just supposed to sweep it under the rug. And then of course everybody heard it. They'll say it in front of everybody. And then they think like, oh, okay, we just supposed to brush this off and like go on about our day, and not realizing that we're talking about self-esteem. We're talking about, how at the end of the day, those young adults feel, especially making those comments in front of people. Hey, if anybody don't know that I gained weight, I know that myself. I know I've been eating good. That meal plan was on point. And yes, I went to the cafeteria to the cafeteria and ate them chicken wings, every day. But again, I don't need you to try to point that out, every time I come somewhere. Are you trying to put me on blast when we had Thanksgiving dinner. And again, like I say, that was just one of those things where, oh, that's disrespectful. You can't talk back. But again, that's when, young adults need to have the courage to say, hey, we're not going to talk about that, whatnot. So
and know that they have people there that are going to support them and back them.
exactly.
Having parents that are going to be bold enough to say, "Hey, that's inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not have this conversation right here, right now.
Right.
We're here, to celebrate the holiday and being together, togetherness. It doesn't align with that." And that makes your young person feel good when they see that, hey, you're coming to my defense, and I don't have to be in this situation and be uncomfortable. So moving on to our next scenario. Your young person is headed to a kickback where alcohol will be served, and they may face peer pressure, inappropriate comments, or opportunities to engage in sex. Well, the world our young adults are navigating is pretty different from the one that we grew up in, right? Kickbacks and hangouts can bring pressure not only to drink, but also to engage in behaviors they're not ready for. We need to prepare them to make confident decisions. How do we do that?
Yeah. So again, just kind of going back to to what I was mentioning earlier, this again is where you want to talk about what it means to give and receive consent, especially if alcohol is involved. Because yeah, they may be 18 or under 21, but some of your older young adults are at 21, so they can drink. And as we know, when you drink, that does limit you from being able to make good choices, as we say. So again, this is where you want to teach them, if this is something that you don't want to do, don't do it. As I was going over consent with some of our public health ambassadors, at any point you can say no. So even if you get to the point where you taking your clothes off, you don't say yes, yes, yes all day, it gets down to it, you can say no at any point, and that person needs to respect that. So definitely, again, that's another opportunity for you to use role playing, talk about what it means, and what it means to consent, because at any time you can say no, and it's important for that person to respect that. And then of course, if that's something that they choose to engage in, because again, we're going to talk about it both, because we're not going to talk just about abstinence. We're going to talk about individuals that are sexually active. So again, in that situation with alcohol involved, using protection, making sure you have the protection on you. Don't assume that the guy or the girl or whoever is bringing the protection. You need to have the protection yourself so that you can protect yourself when you get in those situations.
Wow, that's an interesting point. Don't assume that somebody
Yes, huh?
else is going to have the resources that you need. We have to prepare our young people to know that their health is their responsibility, right? You want to make
Yep.
sure that, again, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. But Brandy, we would be remiss, to isolate this conversation, to young people that are of drinking age, because we do know
Mm-hmm.
these kickbacks. Sometimes everybody
That's true.
that's there probably shouldn't be there, especially given that we are in an age where our young men and women look older. They're developing faster. And so they're more attractive at a younger age. In doing that, they have no control over that. You have
Mm-hmm.
no control over how quickly you develop, and especially for girls. Let's just talk about girls. You know, they develop quickly. Is your young woman confident to know when her boundaries have been crossed? Does she know what her
Mm-hmm.
boundaries are? Does she truly understand what it means to give consent? Unfortunately, we've engaged in conversation with young women that question, did I consent or did I not? So
Mm-hmm.
we want to believe as a society that, oh, I talk to my kids about consent all the time, so they know what it is. But do they? It's one thing. It's just like trying to take textbook knowledge. I textbook wise, my degree says that I'm a public
Mm-hmm.
health practitioner. Application is a whole different ballgame. Now
Right.
you throw in not wanting to be cool, wanting to be relevant, wanting to be on social media, and alcohol and drugs, all of those things into the mix, we can't assume that our young people are properly equipped. And if we doubt that, I challenge you guys to go look at the data. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to make additional posts where I will provide directions on where you can find the data. Numbers don't lie. When we look at gonorrhea and other STIs in Arkansas and in our other southern states, it is evident that our young people don't know. So,
Yeah, most definitely. And Q, and one thing that we definitely don't want to leave out, especially as we're talking to these parents, is that when your child is in the situation, let them know that they can always call you no matter what. If they
yes,
feel uncomfortable or unsafe, they should know that they can call you without you fussing. I say that all the time. Save that fussing. At the time, they call you, just go pick them up.
just go
Okay,
pick them up.
just do what you need to do to make sure that your child is safe. This is not time for you to do no lecture. This is not the time for you to say, oh well, you shouldn't have been there anyway, or anyway, or this is not the time for you to be doing all this fussing and stuff. Just make sure that your child is okay, and again, use that as an opportunity to teach them, to guide them instead of always fussing. Because one of the things that I always say, you're doing all this fussing, you're gonna make it where your kids ain't gonna want to call you for things or whatever, and then they're gonna be put in these situations, and then again, that's when their boundaries may be tested, and they have to go along with it because they feel like they don't have anybody to call. Or even if even having another trusted person that they can call, so rather, I know you always have like that favorite auntie or whatever who you knew to call, but just even making sure that they have somebody that they can call to get them out of those situations, because that's just always important that they know that again, they have somebody that they can call and say, hey, this ain't looking right. It's some grown men that showed up at this party and they got some drugs or whatever. I think I need to go ahead and get on out of here or whatever, and having that person to call. And I know we talk a little bit about, having like safe words and things of that sort. I mean, if that's something that you do, that's something that can work as well. If, hey, I need you to call me because I'm trying to get out of this situation. So developing that relationship with your child so that they know that they can always call you no matter what, and don't have to be fussed at, when they're basically being responsible by even calling you in the first place, because I mean it can end up worse than that.
Imagine how many times, or reflect back on your childhood, on those times where you got in a situation and the first thing your mama said was, "I told you," or
Like,
the first thing she do is hit you.
hey.
The first thing she do is hit you. When you know better, you do better. So one of my
Right.
things is like, if you call me, that's fine. That's gonna be a ride home in silence because I know my mouth slick and your mouth slick too. So let's just go home, get home safely, go to bed, wake up in the morning, and let's have a constructive conversation around what happened, why did it happen, and how do we prevent it from happening again. But then also, Brandy, I agree. We've had additional adults, as you know, because Mackenzie know that if she got questions about sex and she don't want to ask me, she can call you. Look, call Brandy. She done said that. You don't even gotta ask me. Don't ask me. No, you can go to talk to her. But having that village mentality around, if you can't
Mm-hmm.
talk to me, I want to make sure that you are equipped with people that I know are going to provide guidance in a positive and constructive way. Because here's the thing about life: we can try to protect our young people from things and isolate them for knowledge, but we know because we done survived those years. If don't nobody tell you the right stuff, you're gonna go find the answer, and that answer may not be right. And if you
Actually.
don't feel comfortable and confident to go validate that information, then now we just got our young people walking around in ignorance. We got the blind leading the blind. So
Mm-hmm.
we do a lot of community outreach, as you know, Brandy, and the one that tickles me the most. It tickles me, it perplexes me, it saddens me that these young kids is walking around here thinking that if they put on two condoms, that's better than one. Baby, did you take physics? Did they talk to you about friction? Where did y'all come up with this? And it is
Right.
probably very likely that One young person decided that that would be better, and they told another young person and another young person, and there was nobody that they ever came encounter with that they felt
Mm-hmm.
comfortable enough to validate that information. So they just running with it. That's what they out here thinking that that's what they can do, and that's what they should do, and they are protecting themselves. Any other things that you ran into like that, Brandy, where it's just like, wait, I'll get
Oh yeah, definitely in my years as a DIS, working in the health department where I did field investigations. You hear so many stories about getting STIs from the toilet seat or getting STIs from just toys and things of that sort. And and again, it's just going back to the educational part. These are like again older older adults or whatever who don't even know this information as well. So just imagine, what some of those younger individuals don't know, especially if you're not teaching them. Or now we know they got TikTok and all these other places where they get information from. So again, it's about empowering your child, giving them the education so that they can know, where to get valid information, because that's the thing, valid information. Because even like you were mentioning with the two condom thing, they're probably thinking, okay, two are better than one. But as we know, when you start that friction, it's going to cause those condoms to break, using two condoms or whatnot. So yeah, it's just so many myths and things out here. And I think we're actually going into that on our next series, where we talk about like STIs, just some of the myths that we hear, from our young adults, just because they have not been taught, this information, whether it's from a parent, and they're just getting it from anywhere, friends, TikTok, Instagram.
various locations, and definitely we're going to dive into this conversation
Mm-hmm.
next week with some of our other friends as well, where we look into the data and then also some of the myths that people believe. So let's go into our last scenario, Brandy. A family member makes an inappropriate comment about your young adult's body, like your hips are spreading or you're thicker than a sneaker. These comments may seem harmless or even funny to some people. They may think that it's funny, but they can be incredibly uncomfortable, but
Mm-hmm.
also damaging to our young people. How can we as parents empower our young people, but also how can we advocate for them, letting them know that their comfort is our priority?
Yeah, most definitely. So the first thing I would say is just speaking up, because as we know, sometimes a lot of parents, they will let these comments fly, especially when they saying these things to their kids, or like you're saying, they think it's funny. Everybody's around and they think that the young adult is going along, with that, and they may be laughing as well, but especially from just some of those cues that they may give, that they may be uncomfortable with a person making those comments, especially like the whole weight gaining and things of that sort. So I think is for the first step thing I will say is just to redirect the conversation. Because again, we know we got some of those aunties that like to start stuff and like to argue, whatever. So just simply redirecting the conversation so that you won't escalate the situation. And again, we had a family gathering, so we're not here for that. We're not here for them to talk about, because again, those kids eating good just like you eating good or whatever. Whatever. So let's not make comments about our bodies. We're going to talk about something else, and just redirecting the conversation so that we can just get the attention off of them. And then also, this is also showing your young adult that you're modeling respectful boundary setting. Like, okay, we're not going to talk about this. This is not the time or place. Even if you said in a jokingly manner, just being as a parent addressing what was said, and even redirecting, letting people know, like, okay, we're not going to sit up here and talk about my child at Thanksgiving. We just not going to do that.
So, what if your young person wants to handle the situation on their own? How do you support them in doing that?
Yeah. So even with that, if they want to handle it on their own, and again, like I say, with this generation, and even I know we're millennials, but with this generation, as we know, they're very outspoken. They're very they know how to self advocate, for themselves. So even with them handling the situation on their own, this is where you want to teach them how to do stuff because it's a way that you can say things without cussing, without being disrespectful, and where you want to allow them to speak up, to say that, hey, this is not okay. This We're not going to talk about this. I don't need you commenting on my weight, and just say it in a professional manner. Because again, we still going back to respect. Those are your elders. You don't want to be disrespectful. However, you want to go ahead and check them and let them know, like, this is out of line. This is not something that we're going to talk about today.
And then what if it persists? What if they continue? It doesn't stop.
If they continue, so this is one of those situations where where again, um, you have the option to leave. I mean, if you want to leave the situation, if you feel like this is not a space that you want to be in, leave. Okay, I wouldn't want to stay in a place where I feel like a person keeps constantly, trying to cross these boundaries. If my mama done said something, now you have some parents that may, get down about the kids or whatever, but this is a situation where, okay, you know what, we're not going to do this, and leave the situation. And then also, that's where, of course, you can have parents to jump in, especially if that's like their sister or aunt or whatever. That's when parents really need to get in and support their children or whatnot, so that you can make sure that they're not feeling comfortable in those situations. But again, if your parent not seeing anything, you're constantly feeling violated, just leave. Hey, get your to-go box, because y'all know they got some in the back, and leave, because you just don't feel comfortable. And I don't think anybody should be subjected to that, when they're just there to visit family and have a good time.
Yeah. So these scenarios really remind us that parenting passively is really not what we can do this age, in this time, day and age, right? We can't just be observers, just watching things happen to our young people, because it potentially could break their trust and their sense of safety with us. But Brandy, what does this look like day to day? Let's talk about some practical tips that we can use to support our young people in everyday scenarios. So navigating these situations can sometimes feel overwhelming, not just for the young person, but it can also be overwhelming for the parent or for the caregiver, right? So what are some strategies, some simple strategies that we can use to help our young adults feel supported and empowered? At the end of the day, all young people want to be seen, heard, and understood. So, what are some things that we can do when it comes to protecting their gender identity and respecting their boundaries, and then also ensuring that they understand that consent is a value and that they have the power, they hold the power, encouraging them to utilize that power? Because we all come with power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not that they need to be empowered, but they need the space and the skills to exercise their power. So, how do we give that to them?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, one of the things that's effective is having discussions beforehand, because again, you don't want to get to these situations and don't know how to deal with them, whether that's your child or whether that's yourself, especially if it's something that's new to you, especially going back to when we mentioned about pronouns, having those discussions beforehand so that you can, again, like you said, take a moment, pause, like, okay, this is what we're doing now. But even, allowing yourself to feel how you feel about the situation. And then again, okay, this is what it is. How can we move forward? How can I support you as a parent? How do you prefer to handle this? Do you want me to handle it if Auntie Susan say something, or do you want to handle it?
Awesome. Then the other thing we
Yeah.
talked a lot about, Brandy, is advocacy. So before you jump into this, around advocacy, and teaching your child how to advocate for themselves, I want to touch on something. I want to do a little story time, provide a little background information. Advocating for yourself in disrespect, know the difference. Know the difference, and make sure that your young people don't feel like their voice has to be stifled when it comes to protecting themselves, advocating for themselves, in fear of it being viewed as disrespect. So, we're talking about young adults, but consent and boundaries, the foundation for that has to start early on. So, here's where my story time comes in. So, many of you guys know, if you're on here and you know me personally, then you know that I have a 3-year-old little boy by the name of Phoenix. And if you don't, if you're new to this world, stay tuned because you'll hear a lot about my kids because a lot of this work that I do is centered around protecting my own kids. So we've been talking about consent here lately, and knowing that he has autonomy of his body, right? And so at nighttime, he's still very much a mama's boy. He was a breastfed baby, and so I was wanting to pat him to rock him to sleep after we had had a conversation around consent. So I went to pat him on his back, and he quickly turned around and said, "Did you ask my permission to touch me?" You sure right. You sure right. Now, some people would say, "Oh, he's questioning you, and that's disrespectful." No, he's exercising his right to set boundaries and checking me to say, "Before you touch my person, did you ask my permission?" Because if I viewed that as disrespect, then I've truncated the conversation and the lesson. Because what I've said is, you don't have autonomy with your body. Because if you ain't got autonomy at home, how am I going to be confident that you know that when you go out in the streets, or if you're
Hmm.
with a family member, that you know that you still have autonomy of your body and you're not going to be scolded for being disrespectful? So anyway, um, let that marinate. Eat the chicken and chew out the bones. Go ahead, Brandy.
Yeah, and then just a couple of other tips. So again, and as you mentioned, advocating for your child. So like you say, if someone crosses a boundary, it's okay to step in and respectfully but firmly let them know that, okay, these comments are out of the conversation. We all here for positive vibes, hence vibe check or whatnot. So just showing them that they can count on you, and then also, you're setting that example for them, like you mentioned. So okay, you're teaching us at home, this is how you're supposed to model this behavior out in the streets, or like you say, at holiday parties, at kickbacks, at those family gatherings, where people try to test, as we say, test your gangster, so you'll know how to deal with those certain situations. And then another one, just talking about leave, if your boundaries aren't respected. So again, we have those aunts or those uncles, again, when they get a little liquor, around the holidays, they just want to keep going on and on and on. You've addressed it. You said something about it, and they just keep going. You have the right to leave. I mean, I don't see that as a form of disrespect. Yes, your mama says, oh, well, you need to stay here. But if, again, I'm not going to be in a situation where I'm feeling uncomfortable, especially if you have a parent that hasn't said anything. Get your to go plate and leave. Okay.
Get your to go plate and leave. I want to backtrack for just a second and just look at the comments. Terica mentioned that the village has changed. That's the reason why we're having this conversation, Terica. We're having this conversation because the village has changed substantially. Some of the resources that we used to have, we don't have access to, but also the trust that we had in the village and everybody looking out for one another. We don't have that
Mm-hmm.
anymore either, which means that we have to double down on
Mm-hmm.
educating our young people because now your family may not always be your blood family. For example, Brandy and I are both in Arkansas, right? We're both in Arkansas. Brandy from Florida, I'm from Alabama. Ain't neither one of us got no family here. So our village looks a little bit different the majority of the time. And so we have to make sure that we're educating and giving our young people the opportunity to exercise their power because we can't trust that we can't, we hope that we can have people that we can entrust our children with, but we also have to be mindful. But when we get down to it though, yeah, the village has changed, but some of the things that we are talking about happen inside the village, you know?
That's true.
So just being mindful of making sure that we're being intentional about the things that our children are, that they know, but they also know how to put these things into play in real life, right? Not just, the role playing helps us so that they get the practice. So when a scenario approaches them, if you just talked about it, but they have not had a chance to practice it, are they really going to be able to confidently navigate it? And then also, when things come against them and you're standing in the room and you don't use your voice, then are they really going to feel safe enough to use their voice? Because what that sets the tone is that they're not the priority. And we want them to know that they are the priority and that we want to see them, we want to hear them, we want to understand them, and more importantly, we want to respect them. What else you got, Brandy, when it comes to practical skills?
Yeah. And that's good, mention about, the village or whatever, because as we know, it be that very village, which be the one that's the most traumatizing to our children. And again, just using some of these steps in which you can, again, set boundaries, with that village that you have, if that's like your family and things of that sort, because as you say, it has changed. It has changed. People see things differently, and then also we just have a different perspective. Like I say, this new generation of kids, they different, and we want to definitely learn those different skills so that we can help them cope as young kids, and then of course so that they can grow up in life and be able to handle different situations. The big buzzword now is emotional intelligence, and I think that's just so important that kids are learning those different skills when they're younger. So, and I know we're a little bit short on time, so just a couple of other just tips that you can have as a parent or whatever. So teaching them their own exit plan. So again, like I mentioned, you have those code words. Knowing that, okay, if you're going to this kickback, you might need to drive your own car so that if something goes down, you can get in your car and leave. Okay, that used to be one of those things where, and I used to have the friends that like, oh, I'll drive, and I used to wonder why she always said that, but now I get it. Okay, because and again, she was uncomfortable with situations, but even just thinking about that in a bigger perspective, it's just those situations where if something comes up, I can get my keys and I can leave. Okay, and then also and again, role playing those tough conversations. So again, as we're talking about, these are conversations that individuals don't want to have, but in order for us to be able to work through them, in order for us to be able to process them, we have to be able to role play and talk about those tough conversations. So whether it's about sex, whether it's about what type of condoms they're going to use, whether it's about birth control, learn to have those tough conversations, because again, as Dr. Q mentioned, if you stay ready, you don't have
You
to
got to
get
get
ready.
ready. Yes, ma'am.
Exactly.
All right, so Brandy, I want to add something to that. So something simple for you guys to walk away with. Young people want to be seen, right? Seeing them is not just accounting for the fact that they're present. Seeing is being able to recognize when they're giving those signals that they are uncomfortable. Knowing your young person so that you can recognize that their behaviors are changing in certain
Mm-hmm.
situations and around certain people. They want to be heard. What? Here to listen, not to respond. Here to listen, not to respond. Listening non-judgmentally is a skill. It's kind of like, that duck in the water. That duck look like it's smoothly gliding across that water, but up under that water them little legs is putting in work. Sometimes as a parent, you got to be a duck. Man, listen, there are lots of times where my child has done things or said things, and I'm just like, what? But my facial expression to be neutral, like, until I have an opportunity to really process and gather my thoughts so that I can help her in a kind, number one, a kind way, but then also in a way that is a reflection of her and not a reflection of me. I oftentimes ask myself, raising a young adult, is this about me and what I want, or is this about her? Because she her own person, and I want to respect her as her own person, even if it doesn't align with me and the way that I do things, because although we are very similar, we are also very different. And I want her to have the freedom to be able to be who she is. And so I want to hear her. I want to hear her so I can show up for her the way that is best for her. And then they also want to be understood. And being understood is not going back and saying, "Well, when I was a kid, baby, when you was a kid, the biggest concern you had was getting home when the street lights came on. That was all we was worried about. You was drinking water out the hose pipe, riding your bike all day long. How many times do we see kids riding bikes nowadays? We don't see that.
Mm-hmm.
We also did, but what we didn't see, growing up was kids being, you know, taken away. Like the number of girls and boys that we see that just come up missing. Like, why? Why is this so
Mm-hmm.
prevalent? But also growing up, there wasn't a mental health crisis. We weren't in a crisis. It wasn't mental challenges wasn't the norm, but our stress levels were different. So if you don't take anything away from this today, know that our young people want to be seen, heard, and understood. And that they want to know that we are there to protect them and advocate with them, no matter how old they get. When they get 20, 21, 22, they still need us. They still need to know that they can trust us and that if they need us, that we'll advocate for them. And if they want to advocate for themselves, that we'll support them in doing that. Just they want you to have their back. Brandy, I'm gonna take a quick look over here at Facebook and see if we have any additional questions. Terica, thank you for chiming in on the conversation. We really do appreciate that. And I just want to make space if anybody has anything else that they want to say. You're right, Terica. You want to hear to listen, not to respond. Yes, ma'am. But feel free to join us in the chat if you have any questions. We'll leave the last few minutes to answer any questions that you guys have or to just engage in conversation. All right, we'll hold for just a few seconds, Brandy.
Okay.
All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have any traction in the chat. So last comments, Miss Brandy, thank you so much. It's incredibly great. I am incredibly grateful for the work that you do over here at the Village and pushing forth our initiative of Vibe Safe. I do want to elevate that we will start offering vibe check tours. This is an opportunity for organizations to invite us to come to your church, to your youth group, to your after school program, your community, in order to elevate awareness around HIV and other STIs. This is at no cost to you. You set up the logistics and bring the audience, and we bring in the experts like Brandy. We can also bring in testing. We have lots of community partners that we like to partner with in order to move this work forward. At the end of the day, our goal is to swing the pendulum on HIV and STIs amongst the 13 to 24-year-old population. And we can't do that without the parents. So vibe check, how you feeling, Miss Brandy?
Yeah. And of course, we cannot leave here without giving our parents a challenge. Okay. So as we know, on tomorrow, y'all gonna be eating them collard greens, which y'all cooking sweet potato pies, all the things. And again, as we mentioned, the whole purpose of this was just kind of learning how we can navigate the holidays. So use some of the tips that we talked about today. Start talking with your kids, your young adults, and even use this as an opportunity because y'all already know that auntie gonna say something crazy. So use this as an opportunity to advocate for your child, to stand up for your child, or to even start having some of those conversations at home, if because again, I'm sure that you probably have family members who's been saying any things, and just checking in with your young adults to make sure they're okay. And then even as you go through these dinners or whatnot, that you're checking in, you're making sure that you're advocating for them, that you're supporting them. So go ahead and start today because as we know, once you know better, you do better. So again, start today, even if it's something that you haven't done before. Use this as an opportunity to kind of learn, from some of the tips that we gave you today, and use that so that you can help your young adult navigate these holidays. That's
Awesome.
all for me, Q.
All right. Well, Miss Brandy, thank you for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and log us off. You have a great day and happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, guys. Thanks for joining us.